Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida. And I also have the young 20 something first time watcher of the Revival series, Dark Shadows, of course, episode 5 tonight with me. And his name is Professor Pixel. And Pixel, I got to sit there and say that while we've been going through the series, we've noted some themes. You're one of the few Dark Shadows connoisseurs that have seen and consumed all the original episodes, thanks to your lovely parents who sat down and made you watch it as an insufferable baby. This episode is different, and I don't think it's bad. Why I say it's different is because I feel like we've gone so far, and the past few episodes seem like they're all kind of hashed together. But here we get a sense of time, I think, shifting, and I feel this is where this season is really starting to pivot in a major way. I like the episode. There's some practical things about it in terms of the way it's shot that I think is very interesting to get into. But why don't we go ahead and go your initial thoughts next and start us off by going through the episode a little bit. Then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Victoria Winters. I do really love hearing that at the beginning of every episode. But here, we go ahead pretty much where we left off with the last one, with Barnabas and Vicky. They're enjoying a late dinner, and here's when things start to change. This little gift that comes along is, well, okay. At dinner, he gives her Josette's music box. And I need to go ahead and stress this. It is one of the most glorious transitions with the music in this episode, because it has that tune and I love it. But he goes ahead and he talks to Vicky. Oh, I was born being able to do, I can't remember what it's called, a minuet. And he pulls Vicky along into a dance, and the music starts to swell, and it's all romantic and glorious and great. And doom is coming to Collinwood in the form of a woman scorn named Julia Hoffman.
Yes, yes. And the other thing about it too is that I've said before, sometimes I like to feel a little snooty, especially when even Willie, the loyal lap dog here, is wearing turtlenecks, but he's acting all prim and proper like a butler rather than the weird pissy guy we saw half drunk all the time in the first episode or so. And she even remarks about it too. But we're getting that stare from Barnabas that he's getting ready to beat his ass again. I'm wondering if that's going to happen. Just like that short I tweeted out, and everybody seemed to love from episode 1, I believe. But they're talking about the squad they've had and everything. And I thought he's going on full on old world simp mode here too, because how does she not see the music box, right? And he makes her open it. And remember, he's turned her down twice now, as far as, gone the distance, if you know what I'm saying. So kind of keeping it a little G rated here. And I just have to say this. I don't know historically from the old Dark Shadows or whatever movies that were around in the early 70s about Dark Shadows, or what her character is supposed to be, if she really is supposed to be his long lost love or just possessed. It seems like we're going that way. She is just so stunning, a natural beauty here. She's very angelic in that way. It's quite an empty vessel, because other than that, I'm getting no vibe from her at all, other than I'm starting to dislike her a little bit. And it's funny because I do think these two deserve each other, because he just seems really, really hard about it. And we see that wonderful scene a little later in this episode, I believe it is, where he's like reading poetry and talking to the the pitcher about it. And I'm like, what the fuck, bro? Come on. But it's all a part of his master plan. But you're right. I'm starting to like the doctor come in here. Um, this is obviously, if we don't think it's going to be a love triangle, which you always have to have them, and it's always best, of course, when it's two women fighting over a man than the other way around in terms of the enjoyment factor. But she just does such a great job. And again, she was a model before. So when she gets her eyes really, really big or really, really intense, it's very frightening. And it's like very binary. She's either like, really scared or really, really mean looking. And she does it so damn well. But it's amazing because, Victoria just looks like such a young woman compared to her. And of course she is, but it's like a girl versus a woman. And it's amazing because I still feel like we don't know what the doctor's true intentions are going to be, what her plot is, because it doesn't still feel like to me that it's romantic, and I don't feel like it's medicinal, right? Even though she's working with it. I mean, it should go so far that even Willie turning into a super nice guy, they have a conversation. She does what any initially you would think jealous woman would do, and she just says, "Well, screw this. I see that they're really, really close, and they're for TV purposes dancing around the sex part of it here, and that's always not a bad thing necessarily." But she decides that she's going to take the serum that she's been giving him, the treatment, and back off on the dosage and really not to, tell anybody, and it's funny
Yep.
because we start to finally see Willie who, again, if you look at him as a loyal lapdog, he's got his major owner, but he's trying to please everybody, he's trying to please her too, and it's really, really awesome when those 2 kinda hide, and, she pops her head out, and she's watching him reading the poetry and talking to it and all that. It's so fucking campy, and I
Yeah.
still love it.
So the thing is that now I'm sorry, Julia's jealous. She's jealous. She is green with envy, because with how Barnabas speaks to her and showing the music box in the last episode to her and everything, you can tell that she's just so charmed by this man from another time.
But let me ask you
And
this, if that's
okay,
true, then why don't we see her we haven't seen the soft side of her come out, if that were true.
okay.
Like, yes, he is a charming guy, and there's a difference between flirting and charming. Some would argue, and some would say there's not. But even though he's got that old world romanticism about him, she's older and more mature in the ways of the world, and she knows what he is. So it doesn't seem like it's a power, lust for power type thing. So while I can't argue your point, it just seems like it's too obvious, though, don't you think?
Um, I suppose I could say that I'm biased from seeing another perspective on it, but
Okay.
I do see it here that she is just so she's doing for anything for Barnabas. Her best friend died, and Barnabas tells her it's okay. Soon I'll reach my goal. You'll be all right. And she
I
smiles a little and
know.
looks at the music box.
I
Oh,
know.
it's
That's the
gonna
most.
be mine.
Oh.
Yep. But yeah, it's just clear here that his interests lie elsewhere. And hearing Willie confirm that, oh, Barnabas, yeah, he's smitten for Vicky, uh, that's too much for her. And things are going to start happening. But we do have to touch upon
It'll be some
Carolyn and yeah, we do have to touch upon Carolyn and
Hunky
your
Man
best
Meat.
friend Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
give
he's
it to
just
me.
been working. Yeah, it's kind of a quick scene, but Joe is kind of convinced by that okay, well we can go out, we could go to the Blue Whale, go eat some lunch, and Maggie is there, but from here we get to see Maggie glancing a vision of maybe the near future of what could come, a horrific face and attacking Carolyn. Huh. Um, but meanwhile, my favorite part is right after this because they aren't important. What is important is that Barnabas and Vicky are planning to go to a costume party where they dress like their ancestors. I wonder who you'll dress as.
Oh God, this is getting sad territory here. I mean, it's. Let me ask you this. Let's back up for a second. When we
Okay.
see Hunky Man Meat and they're on the boat, of course, a part of me immediately goes, "Okay, what's the purpose of this? Just to keep them fresh in our minds?" We're like that. She obviously is trying to have sex with him, and he's refusing her. But then when they go to the place and they have some food there or whatever, where we get that wonderful little vision, which I love that. It's almost like Christopher Walken-ish, like from the Dead Zone, right? It's like, did they? I don't know, but they're definitely more. He's more relaxed. He's not as tense, as it were. It's I, I don't know, and so I don't know where that's supposed to be going, but I don't know. You're right. It's a quick scene. Not sure exactly where it's supposed to take us, but the thing is I wanted to bring up when we're talking about practical effects, and we've talked about them a little bit with the fireplace scene and a few other things, the book writing itself. Yeah, those aren't, overly expensive or whatever, but to me, I like what we're gonna see in this episode, and we're reminded that she does get these flashbacks, these little things or whatever. But before we get to all that, which is a big part of this episode, you're right about the whole bit with the the dance and all that. That gives you something to look forward to, and it fits in a series like this, right? But
Mhm.
we get her almost being a little bit of a hard ass with Barnabas about it. And what I like about this scene where we see his reflection in a big mirror, that's important. And she says all the doctory things. We have to proceed with caution. And he quotes the whole Shakespeare thing about moderation in all things and all that. And he's rocking some like Armani blackish turtleneckish thing or whatever. They both are. So I don't know if that's significant because certain scenes, some people seem like they're dressed like yin and yang, I guess, or like here I go, this makes me feel like they're a couple, and I don't know if that's intentional or just she dresses in black a lot, so maybe I'm reaching here, but the way she watches Barnabas and doesn't act like a fawning young woman, I think is interesting. Um, but I don't know. The whole scene with her being seduced by the house and oh, it's raining so hard, I guess she'll stay the night, and they're doing the proper thing or whatever. It's so bad, but she is just like I say, so dreamy looking. She's really perfect for the role. And I got to be honest, I don't know if they're expensive or if they're cheap props. And again, most of the time when you have suits like we talked about or things, it's to focus on the actor's face or person's face to accent what they have, whether it's good or not. Your eyes shouldn't be focused on everything that's not their face, right? Or their body. But these things are really great. So when they talk about this, big dance coming up or like that, it's like really, really cool. But she's throwing herself at him when she comes out with the gown and all that. He's basically crying like a little bitch. It's really pathetic. It's worse than Willie getting beat to me or whatever. So much so that she's like, "Well, Josette, I'm in your bed and I'm wearing your robe and well," and it's like, really?
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
love it. I
Do
love
you?
it because when she's there and he's she's talking to Barnabas and she's like, "Oh, I don't want to take it out," and he basically says, "Well, it's a little bit too wet outside. Why don't you just stay in here? You can stay in the room. You'll be perfectly
But
safe."
you're not getting any feeling from him because of course he has to wait till he's turned so he can pursue this fully. So he has to string her along. So I get it, but you're not getting that sexual tension or desire from him. You're just getting that hopeful, schoolboyish kind of crush. And remember, he's been asleep for a really long time. But the best part about this is once I think they're getting really silly, despite Willie crushing it in this episode, acting like a dog, he really redeems himself with the whole going up there, not realizing that his serum had been reduced in potency, where he sits there and he basically is struggling with himself, trying not to bite her on the neck. And every time I want to hate on the guy for being in a simple role, I have to recognize one, he didn't write it. Two, he has to deliver it, and god damn it, he does here because it's phenomenal how he's quiet about it, and just the effects are good enough. And he has that very, I wouldn't say a strong face. It's not a feminine or a dainty or pretty face, but it's very like rigid. It's very hawkish. It's very aquiline or whatever the hell that term is or whatever. And when he gets Willie to come in here and he forces he forces Willie to chain him up, this is awesome stuff. It's absurd. I
Yes.
love it. It's just I don't know what your take is on it, but it's little things like that where he's just screaming, "Help me, help me." I'm like, "Oh, that's good. I love it." So he plays both ends of that spectrum, I think, awesome. Especially even when he goes back to sneak into the house to go get the doctor. This is good shit. This is the teenager crap stuff on the adult level.
Yeah, when he goes ahead and says, "Willie, go ahead and get Julia," and he's ready for it to end right then and there. He's like, I'm done. I am." He's not going to sit around and wait anymore because the cravings are coming back. She messed him up, and now she's going to mess him up real good because she does give him the dosage. And he says that he basically doesn't need her anymore. She goes away, and that morning, when they're having breakfast, Barnabas is trying to enjoy it, but then notices his two hands rapidly aging.
Yes. Over breakfast, because I love it when there's more than one thing going on in a scene in terms of like, we started off a little bit and they're having dinner, right? So they're eating and things are going on with it. But, you're of course taking in the scene and what's happening with the actors, what's not being said, what's there. But then just the fact that something revolves around food, that's very old schoolish in a way. And I like that because here they're having breakfast, right? And again, she's like, "Hey, Willie's becoming a really, really, really good cook." So it's like, I know we dump on Willie for being like a Renfield type, a manservant or a loyal lapdog, as I like to think of him. But we sometimes forget that we talk about the curse that he has and the thing that's been mentioned a few times about he'll always hurt the ones that he loves. He's doomed to be
Mm-hmm.
destructive or whatever in terms of relationships, however it was phrased. We go, what about Willie? And what about everybody else? And that's the one thing I think that's becoming very apparent, that no matter how little screen time some of the people are getting in here, unless they're killed off, like we've said, people seem to have this historical backstory. And I wonder what Willie's is. Maybe it's a manservant. I don't know. But they're loyal and there's a reason for it. But even when the doctor goes and visits him to give him those final dosage, two things. One, her hair is long and wet, looks great because she normally has it up or back in a bun. Really takes about 5 or 10 years off of her. But just little stuff with the one or two like little music notes, because it's not a heavily scored show, work. And it feels like it's from the 60s. I don't know if they've lifted some parts of it. I know Just That's Music Box, they took it from the original, or they modified it and made it so it would be that way. But just him coming out with a little bit of makeup on his face, and I don't even know if he has it on his hands. Just the way that Ben Cross, the actor, is able to kind of like point at her and just say stuff like "Answer me." It's so good and believable that I give him so much credit because, again, we're talking a lot of weird, silly stuff, and that was really what happened with the original Dark Shadows. And you can attest to this, that
Yeah.
it was kind of going along. It was kind of boring. People really watched it. It was going to get canceled. So he said, "Screw it. I'll throw in the vampire. Okay, screw it. Screw it. I'll throw in werewolves. I'll do this. I'll do that, and all whatever that that I don't." We're getting a condensed version of that here. That's why this is so great. And to me, this works. He sells it so well. So I can talk about him simping, but here you feel like he's really channeled a dangerous, evil part of his psyche in here. And
Yeah.
this is a nice scene. I like it.
Yeah. When you talk about that, this vampire storyline was supposed to actually just last like 13 weeks, and then Barnabas was going to be killed off, I believe, like by Maggie or something.
Right.
That didn't happen. uh, because there's just something about Barnabas Collins that everybody loves to see.
Yep.
He is the original loving vampire from the past who's just so. You don't realize how troubled he is deep in his soul. You want to fix him.
Yeah. He's it's interesting because when I look at the two alpha males here, it's him and it's Roger Collins, right?
Yeah.
So we haven't seen Roger for a little bit, but he's got a mystical person in his circle. So I feel like we can kind of see what the sides are going to be at some point, or at least that's what it feels like. But even the practical effects here with his hands aging that you referenced, when he's rubbing his face and he's like, "You got to go get Dr. Hoffman," and all that, and he rubs his face. That's of course the director saying, "Make sure because we're framing your face that you get your hands up there so
Yeah.
they're visible." But it's effective. It works, and I'm gonna mention something about that here a little bit later as we're getting close to this like last 10 minutes or so here. So take us forward a little bit unless you have any more comments.
No. Moving right along, Willie does go over to the great house of Collinwood,
And
and
food almost gets him like a dog. He's almost betrayed by food.
yeah, uh, because yeah, his aunt's there, Mrs. Johnson. Oh, hi. But he does go to Julia, and Julia is being like so stubborn. No, he says he doesn't need me anymore. I don't really care. And you can tell that she does care, but she's so hurt. Her fifis are hurt, so she's not going. And this leads to trouble because that same evening, Carolyn decides to stop by the old house to ask Barnabas, "Hey, you're attending the costume party, right?"
She's the
This
original sex bot.
Yeah, she goes in there and she tries to talk to him, and goes up to the chair, and she seems like, oh well, she's in a fine mood. Then sees the face of the actively aging Barnabas Collins, and he is like a wild animal. It's he pins her to the ground and pulls up her hair and just drinks. And he demands Willie, once Willie gets in there, to close the curtain, and he slowly regains his youthfulness, but he lost his reflection. He
Very
is,
Incredible Hulkish, like.
yeah, he is full vampire. He is full vampire once again. He smashes the mirror with, I don't remember what he throws, but he smashes the mirror
Yep.
and then orders Carolyn to get up, saying that when I call upon you, you will come to me. And then he gives her a light kiss, which is kind of weird when you say, you're the blood of my blood, my kin. But at least it wasn't like he kissed Daphne.
I loved this scene because everything I said about him kind of simping earlier on, or being lovesick, whatever you want to call it, almost. I don't know at what age he turned into a vampire, but if you think about it, one of the things like in a Vampire Lestat, like when I think it's Claudia, the young one, the 12 years old or 10 or 9 or I don't know, whatever. Point is a preteen girl, when she turned, she was always going to be physically that age, whatever. So to me, when I look at Barnes, I go, he may be quote unquote 200 years old, but if he hasn't been a lot active, he's basically like a 20-year-old young man or whatever it would be, which would be a man back, hundreds of years ago, right? So sometimes we forget that because we just look at that number and we go, wow, centuries, he must be mature and whatever. And so I think that's lost because it's never presented that way. He is portrayed as being somebody that's at least well read, and maybe he's not. Maybe he's just educated by those old standards back in the day. As he said early in the episode, he was born, dancing to the minuet, right? But this scene is really great for a lot of reasons. One of them is not just because of the acting here; he totally sells it, but the acting from everybody's great. It's not completely over the top. You can feel when you watch this scene that he really was struggled and didn't want to do it. Willie in here, you feel the anguish from him that, hey, somebody in my pack got injured, even though it was by somebody else in the pack. He really didn't want to see it. You could tell that, and we don't know what's going to happen here, but she does a great job of looking like she's being cast under spell. You can see it on her eyes. That's a nice little bit of acting. Excuse me. The kiss thing you're mentioning, okay, whatever. But
I see your reply. Just talk about a Blackburn instead.
no. But one more thing about this whole scene that I really, really liked. The first thought that came to my mind, especially for the older generation that's tuning into this, we've talked a lot about, say, how practical effects versus special effects mean things. And to me, I still think the original TV broadcast, I believe it was over 2 nights, of Salem's Lot by Stephen King is still incredible. It still creeps the shit out of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that, you've got, of course, James Mason's fantastic, but the people that act in it, it's simple effects, whether it's the contact lenses, the skin that's put onto them. There's a scene where Danny Glick's floating above a window, which it's creepy. This scene, even though he's obviously quote unquote aged rapidly, like you say, in the sunlight, it's crappy effects, especially by today's standards, but it still looks really real and very good. And there's an element of creepiness to it. And they don't go into anything cute here at the end. After he basically, gets through the end here, he is pissed. I feel like the battle lines are drawn. Nice way to end, because it kind of started off, I thought, a little, romantic and nice and sweet and cute. And then it just went downhill into uh, what we don't always get a lot of in this series, almost dark. And the show isn't supposed to be dark. It's supposed to, I think, be more gothic, which doesn't mean it's always dark, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, like I say, he did such a great job of communicating. No, I am a badass. I'm just not a badass all the time because I do want to be human. So I really got to give everybody credit for it. I know everybody thinks Barnabas is the man. I just think the other actors in here really do a great job. Even though we didn't see the sheriff in here yet, or some others, or the kid. I enjoyed it, but it just feels like a totally different episode. It feels like okay, we're getting into the mid game of chess right here. We've had our opening, whatever it is, it is. We're at that point where the next couple combinations are going to determine the path forward in the end game. And I'll just throw this at you with your final thoughts here. Of course, the show came out, and a lot of episodes got preempted with the Gulf War back in the early '90s. I clearly recall that in real time watching it. Of course, you weren't around at the time, but you and I covered over the past year or so every single episode of the original Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, season 2 of Twin Peaks, and of course, the return from a few years ago. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This was playing at the same time as Twin Peaks. And I thought to myself at that time very clearly, wow, two really great shows. I hope they go on for a long time. Boy, was I wrong. But boy, they're still really good. And I'm glad we're covering it now because
Yeah.
I haven't been disappointed at all. Final thoughts.
This episode, before I started talking about it, I was like, well, this one was kind of weak in comparison. I'm not sure how I feel if I really liked this one. But in talking about it, I realized just like the soft brilliance, and I'm so excited for where we're going because it's almost right where it was in the original series. That you're wondering, okay, where the hell do we go from here?
Right.
He is pissed at Julia for one reason, for one thing, and then he still has his never dying love for Victoria, and
For Josette.
for Josette.
Victoria.
That's right. That's an interesting topic that I could go on, but that would require a lot longer. But for right now, it's going in such a direction that I'm so happy that we're covering this. I waited so long. It's only been over a year and a half since I watched all of the original Dark Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
But it still feels like forever ago. And this is just rekindling my love for it so much. It's brilliant.
Yeah, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dark Shadows, a revival from 1991, the TV condensed series that unfortunately would not get a season 2, partly because of being preempted for the Gulf War. People kind of did not get in the habit of watching it. And just like Twin Peaks, this was great coffee talk at work or just, friends or whatever. It was just kind of badass and a really, really fun thing to watch. So I'm very disappointed. And I understand whatever reboot they were going to do. I don't know if that disappeared due to how crappy and campy the Johnny Depp version was, but this TV show is as good as anything out there on Netflix today. I mean, I wish it were on, and it is difficult to find. So depending on where you're at listening to this around the world and all that, there is on YouTube TV many of the episodes in a decent quality. So it's the only place that you can readily watch it now. Amazon and others don't appear to have it. So at least right now it's on rotation. I do know a few years ago it was.
The only issue is the next episode, but Rob, I found it. So we're safe for our review next week.
There you go.
And if you look hard enough on the internet, you'll be able to find episode 6 of 1991's revival of Dark Shadows.
A legal method as well. Of course, we advocate. We don't advocate
totally legal. Yeah. There's no other question about that. No.
All right, for Professor Pixel and everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, I'm your host, Rob. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. And as always, remember to stay extreme.
And the Dark Shadows is a Dan Curtis production.
Whammy.